stop for a moment and think about how you usually treat your RRSP tax refund. For most people, that refund feels like a reward. You did the right thing, you saved money, and now the government is giving something back. That feeling is exactly the problem, because the RRSP refund is not a bonus. It is not free money, and it is definitely not a gift. What is actually happening is much less comforting. When you receive an RRSP refund, the government is not paying you for being responsible. The government is temporarily returning its share of your contribution and allowing you to hold it for a while. In other words, that refund is an interest-free loan from the government to you, and just like any loan, it eventually has to be paid back. Here is where things quietly go wrong. Many people take that refund and spend it. A vacation, a new television, paying down a credit card. It feels harmless because the money arrived without effort. But by spending that refund, you are not using found money. You're borrowing from your future retirement income. You're spending money today that will be taxed back out of your RRSP later. This misunderstanding compounds over time. The government does not just reclaim the original amount it loaned you, it also taxes its share of the growth when you withdraw funds in retirement. That means every dollar of refund you spend today quietly increases the tax burden your future self will face. This content is for educational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always review your personal situation or consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions. Now that you understand the refund is not a bonus, we need to go one level deeper. This is where most people make the second and even more dangerous mistake. They believe an RRSP is a tax deduction in the true sense of the word. On paper, that is what it is called. But behaviorally, that label is misleading and costly. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. An RRSP does not eliminate tax. It delays tax. Nothing is forgiven. Nothing disappears. The government is not saying you never have to pay. It is saying you can pay later. And later almost always means when you need the money the most. The easiest way to understand this is to stop thinking of your RRSP as a personal account and start thinking of it as a joint venture. You and the government are partners from the very beginning. If your marginal tax rate is 30% and you contribute $1,000, you do not truly own $1,000. You own $700. The government owns $300. The only reason your statement shows the full amount is because the government allows its portion to sit there and grow alongside yours. This is where the illusion becomes dangerous. Over time, your ERRSP grows and the balance looks impressive, but that growth is not entirely yours. When you withdraw money in retirement, the government does not just take back its original share. That ownership was established on day one. You are not being punished later. You are settling a deferred obligation. Calling an RRSP a tax-free account is incorrect. Understanding this changes how you plan. This content is for educational purposes only. Once people understand that an RRSP is a tax deferral and not free money, they often believe the hard part is over. It is not. This is where the most expensive mistake actually happens. It is called the execution gap. The execution gap is the space between knowing what you should do and actually doing it. Most people intellectually understand that the refund should be reinvested. They nod along. They agree with the logic. And then the refund arrives. It sits in the bank account. Days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months. Maybe the market feels high. Maybe life gets busy. Maybe there is always something more urgent to spend it on. This hesitation quietly destroys the entire strategy. This delay creates what is known as cash drag. Money that should be compounding is sitting idle. But worse than that, hesitation often turns into rationalization. People tell themselves they deserve the money. They saved responsibly. They earned the refund. And so the refund is spent. Not maliciously, not recklessly, but casually. And that casual decision compounds into a lifelong financial penalty. Spending the refund is the same as borrowing from your future self. There is no monthly bill, No warning letter, but the cost shows up later. This is consumption disguised as planning. This content is for educational purposes only. So if spending the refund is the mistake, the obvious question becomes this: what is the correct move instead? This is where the strategy finally becomes clear. And it is also where most people stop short, because it requires a shift in how they think about their money. The answer is something called the gross up strategy. Gross up simply means this: you stop investing only what you have after tax and start planning around the full pre-tax amount. Most people contribute whatever cash they have available. They put in $10,000 because that is what is sitting in their account. They get a refund later and treat it as optional. That approach guarantees that part of the money never gets the chance to compound. The gross up strategy flips that thinking completely. Instead of asking how much cash you can contribute, you ask how much pre-tax income this cash represents. The math is simple but powerful. You take the amount of cash you have and divide it by 1 minus your marginal tax rate. That number is your true contribution target. That is the amount that should be invested if you want the RRSP to deliver its full benefit. Why does this matter so much? Because without gross up, the government's share of the contribution never compounds. It sits outside the market. It does nothing. And over decades, that missing compounding adds up to a massive difference in outcomes. With gross up, every dollar that belongs to both you and the government is working from day one. This strategy forces a critical behavioral change. The refund is no longer treated as spending money. It becomes a required part of the plan. It is not optional. It is not flexible. It is essential. When done correctly, the RRSP starts to behave much closer to a tax-free account. Because the full amount is invested before any tax friction occurs. This is the moment where RRSP planning stops being passive and starts becoming intentional. It is not about contributing more money. It is about structuring contributions correctly so the math finally works in your favor. This content is for educational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always review your own situation or consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions. At this point, a very practical problem appears. The gross up strategy sounds great in theory, but many people immediately think the same thing. I understand the math, but I do not have enough cash to invest the full pre-tax amount right now. This is where most plans quietly collapse. And this is exactly where the short-term loan comes into the picture. Used correctly, a short-term loan is not a risk-taking move. It is a timing tool. The idea is simple. You temporarily borrow the portion of the contribution that represents the government share. You invest the full grossed-up amount immediately. Then, when the tax refund arrives, that refund is used for one purpose only. It pays off the loan in full. No delays, no exceptions. When this is executed properly, the loan disappears almost as quickly as it appeared. You're not carrying long-term debt. You're not gambling on markets. You are simply aligning the timing of the contribution with the timing of the refund. The result is that a much larger amount of capital starts compounding right away. This is what creates the escalator effect. You're standing on a moving platform that lifts your long-term results without increasing your out-of-pocket cost. But this is where the warning becomes critical. This strategy only works with absolute discipline. If the refund arrives and you spend it instead of paying off the loan, everything breaks. What was meant to be a temporary bridge turns into real debt. Interest costs appear, stress increases, and the financial damage can be severe. This is why this method is not for everyone. It is not a shortcut. It is not a trick. It is a precision tool that demands follow-through. Without discipline, it magnifies mistakes instead of benefits. With discipline, it allows the gross up strategy to work exactly as intended. The takeaway is simple. Borrowing is not the problem. Uncontrolled behavior is the problem. When rules are clear and followed without compromise, this approach can significantly improve long-term outcomes. When rules are ignored, it becomes dangerous. This content is for educational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always review your own situation or consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions. Now we reach the final and most overlooked part of the entire system. Everything you have learned so far means very little if you ignore where your investments live and how you eventually take the money out. This is where many disciplined savers unknowingly turn success into a problem. Once your RRSP is properly funded and structured, the next question is what belongs inside it. Not all assets are equal from a tax perspective. Certain international investments, particularly income-producing assets, receive more favorable treatment when held inside registered retirement accounts. Placing the wrong assets in the wrong account creates a silent tax drag that compounds year after year. It is not dramatic, it does not trigger alerts, but over decades, it quietly erodes wealth that could have been preserved with better structure. But asset placement is only half the story. The true danger appears at the exit. By law, RRSPs must eventually convert into income-generating accounts that force withdrawals every year. If withdrawals become too large, they can push retirees into higher tax brackets at exactly the wrong time. Even worse, high retirement income can reduce or eliminate government benefits designed to support older Canadians. This creates an effective tax rate far higher than most people expect. This is the paradox. Doing everything right on the accumulation side can create a trap on the withdrawal side if planning is not coordinated. That is why RRSPs should never be viewed in isolation. They must be balanced with other tools that allow tax-free withdrawals and income flexibility later in life. The lesson across this entire series is simple but powerful. RRSPs are not good or bad. They are precise tools. Used carelessly, they delay pain. Used intentionally, they build security. The difference is not income level or intelligence. It is understanding and discipline. If there is one takeaway to carry forward, it is this. Always think beyond the contribution. Ask who truly owns the money. Ask where it should live. Ask how it will come back to you. Long-term success is not about maximizing accounts. It is about aligning behavior, structure, and timing so the system works for you instead of against you. This content is for educational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always review your personal situation or consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions.